Noah looked at Tate like he had managed to break through Tate's walls. "There he is," Noah said softly. Tate shook his head, still smiling. "You're making fun of me while I'm having an emotional crisis." "Yes," Noah said, "because you're being ridiculous." Tate laughed again, looking down as if he hated that Noah was right. And for the first time all morning, the room felt less like a goodbye and more like a conversation. Noah looked at Tate, his expression steady and certain. "I don't care what your head tells you," Noah said quietly. "I don't care what your social class says, I don't care what your future is supposed to look like, and I don't care what anyone else thinks." Tate stared at him, caught off guard by the simplicity of it. Noah held his gaze. "The only place Noah Lunas wants to be." He paused, squeezing Tate's chest from behind. "Is wherever Tate Blue is." For once, Tate didn't have a response ready. He had spent years preparing for arguments about money, status, expectations, and responsibility. He knew how to defend himself against criticism. He knew how to explain why he was difficult, why he was complicated, why people eventually left. But he didn't know what to do with someone simply choosing him. "Tate," Noah continued softly, "you keep talking like you're some burden I have to carry, like I'm trapped here and eventually I'll realize I made a mistake." He shook his head. "I'm not here because I feel sorry for you, I'm not here because I owe you something, I'm here because I want to be." Tate looked down, his grip tightening slightly. Noah smiled faintly. "You don't get to decide that I don't belong in your life just because you're scared I'm going to leave it." Tate shook his head slowly. "No, Noah." His voice was quiet, but there was a certainty behind it that came from years of believing the same thing. "You're the only one in this room who actually has a chance to get out, to have a life, to enjoy whatever time you have left." Noah's expression changed, but Tate continued. "You don't have expectations hanging over your head the way I do. You don't have duties you were born into. You don't have people waiting for you to fail because you didn't become exactly what they planned for you to be." He looked away. "You have a chance to define your own life, to find real love, to build friendships that aren't based on what you can provide for them and vice versa, to have the kind of life you actually deserve." Tate swallowed. "I'll never have those things." "Tate, I can't give those things to you, Noah." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't give you a happy ending." He gave a sad, almost helpless laugh. "Because we're guys, because we're different, because the world we live in doesn't work that way, and if you stay around me you're going to get hurt." Noah opened his mouth, but Tate shook his head. "Not just hurt feelings." He looked directly at him. "Really hurt." The seriousness in his eyes made Noah go quiet. "I'll seriously disappoint you, I'll let you down too hard, I'll break your heart into a million pieces too many times over." Tate's grip loosened. "I'm not good for anyone." A pause. "Especially you." Noah stared at him, seeing past the anger and the arrogance and the confidence Tate showed everyone else. This wasn't Tate trying to push him away because he didn't care. This was Tate trying to push him away because he cared too much. "No," Noah said softly. Tate looked at him. "You don't get to decide you're unlovable and call it protecting me." Tate looked down. "You keep telling me what I deserve," Noah continued. "But you never ask yourself if maybe you deserve something too." The truth is that Noah Lunas is happiest when he's close to Tate Blue. Noah said it simply, without hesitation, like it was the easiest truth in the world. Tate looked at him, almost waiting for the explanation, the argument, the list of reasons, the justification. But Noah didn't give him one. Tate went still for a moment, his expression changing from anger to something much heavier. The fight seemed to drain out of him, leaving behind the fear that had been underneath everything he had said. Then he stepped back slightly. "Stay away from me," Tate said. Noah's face immediately changed. Not because the words were harsh, Tate had said harsh things before, but because Noah recognized the tone. This wasn't Tate trying to hurt him, this was Tate trying to convince himself that hurting Noah was an act of love. "Tate." "No." Tate shook his head, refusing to let Noah close the distance. "I'll ruin your life if I haven't already." Noah stared at him, hurt flashing across his face. "Do you actually believe that?" Tate looked away. "You have a chance not to have to deal with this." He gestured vaguely around them as if everything, the expectations, the pressure, the family, the pain, was something toxic that followed him everywhere. You have a chance to escape me. Noah's expression hardened slightly. Escape you. Tate swallowed. I'm poison, Noah. The words came out quieter than before. I would infect your life. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. You have a chance to get away from all the things you don't understand. All the pressure, all the mess, all the things about me that people never realize because they're too blind to realize what's right in front of their face. Noah shook his head slowly. That's not what I think of you. But Tate continued, trapped in his own thoughts. If I cared about you, if I actually cared about what was best for you, I should have sent you away years ago. Noah looked at him in disbelief. Is that what you think you've been doing, protecting me? Tate didn't answer. Noah stepped closer. You think loving someone means deciding they're better off without you? Tate's eyes dropped. You don't get to erase my choices because you're afraid of what might happen. Noah's voice softened. I know who you are, Tate. I know you're complicated. I know you're angry. I know you carry things most people will never understand. He paused. But I also know the person who remembers my favorite things. The person who worries about whether I'm safe. The person who just spent an entire morning making sure my house is protected because you think you're leaving. Tate looked away. You call yourself poison, but everything you do is because you're trying to take care of people. Noah reached for his hand. You keep telling me I need to escape you. He shook his head. But maybe you're the one who needs to understand that I'm not trapped. Tate looked at him. I'm here because I choose to be. There's no happy ending, Noah, for us, Tate said. The certainty in his voice was almost more painful than anger would have been. He wasn't fighting anymore. He sounded like someone who had already mourned something that hadn't even ended yet. Not the kind you're imagining. Noah stared at him. What are you talking about? Tate looked down, shaking his head. There's no version where we're just happy and we have this great life together. No perfect ending where everything works out and everyone finally understands. His voice became quieter. I've been fooling myself for 20 years that something like that was possible. Noah's expression softened. Tate. No, Tate looked at him. I mean it. He took a breath. I kept telling myself that if I tried hard enough, if I protected you enough, if I loved you enough, eventually everything would make sense. Eventually, there would be a moment where everything I sacrificed would be worth it. He gave a sad smile. But that's not how life works. Noah stepped closer. Tate, you don't know that. Yes, I do. Tate's voice cracked slightly. There's no chance in hell we get a happy ending. The words hung between them. Noah looked at him, hurt not because Tate was rejecting him, but because Tate sounded so completely convinced that happiness was something he wasn't allowed to have. You already decided the ending, Noah said quietly. Tate looked away. You wrote the last page before we even got there. Tate didn't answer. You're not telling me what's going to happen, Noah continued. You're telling me what you're afraid will happen. Tate swallowed. I'm being realistic. No, Noah said softly, you're being afraid. Tate looked at him. And you're so used to losing things that you're trying to lose me before I can choose to stay. Tate looked at Noah in a way Noah had never seen before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't frustration, it wasn't even sadness exactly. It was something deeper. Something that made Noah feel like he was standing in front of someone who had been carrying a weight for so long that he no longer remembered what it felt like to put it down. For a moment, Noah wondered if being close to Tate was like standing on a landmine, if one wrong step, one wrong word, one wrong decision would cause everything Tate had been holding together to explode. Tate. I can't fight against 700 years of duty, legacy, and expectation, Noah. His voice was quiet, almost resigned. And I can't fight against the inevitable. Noah shook his head. Don't say that. But it's true. Tate looked away. And even if somehow I could fight against all of it, even if I somehow won. He paused. There wouldn't be anything left of me when it was over. Noah watched him carefully. Tate wasn't talking about losing a battle. He was talking about losing himself. My entire life has been preparing me for one thing, Tate said, to become what everyone expects me to become, to carry everything forward, to be useful. His jaw tightened. So what happens if I refuse? What happens if I choose myself? He gave a small, humorless laugh. People like me don't get unlimited choices. Noah stepped closer. Tate. There are only two outcomes. Tate looked at him. You fake it. His voice dropped. Or you die. Noah went silent. Those are the only outcomes for rich boys like me. The words stayed in the air. Noah didn't hear arrogance in them. He didn't hear someone bragging about power or privilege. He heard someone who had spent his entire life believing he was trapped inside a role he never chose. And for the first time, Noah understood that Tate wasn't afraid of losing money, status, or approval. He was afraid there would be nothing left of him if he stopped being what everyone demanded. It's not a game, Noah, Tate said. His voice wasn't angry, that almost made it worse. He sounded exhausted. If I make a mistake, I don't just get sent away on some vacation while my father smooths over another scandal. Noah watched him carefully. That's what people don't understand. They think that because I have money, every mistake disappears. They think there's always some safety net waiting for me. Tate shook his head. There isn't. He looked down. If I make the wrong decision, 500,000 of my employees suffer. Noah's expression softened. Being the leader of a company isn't just sitting behind a desk, signing papers and acting important. It's not just the title or the money. Tate gestured toward himself. It's a responsibility. His voice grew heavier. It's knowing that your choices affect 500,000 people. Their jobs, their families, their futures. People who will never meet me, who will never know me, but whose lives can still be changed by what I do. Noah opened his mouth, but Tate continued. You may have slept next to me for 20 years. He looked directly at him. You may know my habits, you may know what makes me laugh, you may know when I'm upset before I say anything. A pause. But you don't know what it's like to be Tate Blue. Noah went quiet. Tate looked away. You know me as the person standing in front of you, not the person everyone else expects me to be. His voice softened. And those are two very different things. This isn't just about you and me, Tate said. His voice was quiet, but there was a finality behind it, like he was trying to explain something that felt impossible for Noah to understand. This isn't some convoluted Disney love story where love wins out in the end. He shook his head. Sometimes love doesn't fix everything. Tate looked down. Sometimes love is the worst thing imaginable. Noah watched him carefully, hearing the pain underneath the words. Because when you love someone, you don't just have something to gain, you have something to lose. Tate looked back at him. Love doesn't erase responsibility, it doesn't erase expectations, it doesn't erase the consequences of your choices. His voice softened. Sometimes the thing you love most is the thing that makes everything hurt more. A pause. So no, Noah, this isn't about some fantasy where two people love each other and somehow everything magically works out. He swallowed. Sometimes love is real and it still isn't enough to make the world easier. I told you years ago, Tate said quietly, that I wouldn't love you. I absolutely refuse to love you. Noah looked at him, hurt crossing his face. I told myself that I wouldn't let it happen. I made decisions specifically so I would never get to that point. Tate looked away. Because loving you would be irresponsible, that's what I was taught. That anything that doesn't serve a purpose, anything that doesn't strengthen the family, the business, or the future is a liability. His jaw tightened. People in my social sphere look at you and they say you're irrelevant. They say you don't serve a purpose in the world I come from. Noah's expression hardened slightly. A purpose. Tate sighed. They don't understand why someone like me would spend so much time with someone who doesn't add to the image they've created. He swallowed. They ask what good is a boy to me. The words sounded cruel even as Tate repeated them. Having a boy in my bed is pointless to them. It doesn't create an alliance. It doesn't expand the family name. It doesn't produce an heir. It doesn't increase influence. Tate gave a bitter laugh. To them, if something doesn't have a measurable benefit, it has no value. He looked at Noah. Blues don't do pointless things. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped closer. Is that what you think I am, pointless? Tate immediately shook his head. No. Then why are you saying it? Tate looked down. Because that's the world I was raised in. Noah's voice softened. Then maybe the problem isn't that I don't belong in your life, Tate. He held Tate's gaze. Maybe the problem is that you've spent your whole life being taught that anything valuable has to be useful. Tate shook his head slowly. When I was a little boy, when we were young, our relationship was cute. For a moment, his expression softened, like he was remembering a time before everything became complicated. At least that's what Talia always said. He gave a small sad smile. Back then, it was simple, nobody questioned it. Nobody looked at it and tried to figure out what it meant. You were just Noe, you were my buddy, the person who was always there. Noah looked at him. And I still am. Tate's eyes flickered, but he continued. But as I got older, I realized what our relationship really is. He looked directly at Noah. Noe, our relationship is unnatural and obscene. The word landed heavily. And the amount of time it's lasted, 20 years, is obscene. Noah frowned. Why do you keep saying that like something being long-lasting is something shameful? Tate looked away. Because 20 years means something, Noah. It means we built a life around something that my world will never understand. He shook his head. If I had any self-respect for you, I should have turned you loose 10 years ago, at the very minimum. Noah stared at him. Self-respect for me, Tate, you're acting like staying with you was something you did to me. Tate swallowed. Allowing you to stay this long, giving you false hope, that was cruel. No, Noah said firmly, what's cruel is deciding I'm a victim when I'm standing right here telling you I chose this. Tate looked at him. You don't understand. Then explain it to me, Noah said, don't decide for me. Tate sighed. People like me aren't supposed to end up with people like you. He gave a bitter laugh. Princes don't end up with poor blondes. Noah shook his head. I'm not some pauper waiting for you to save me from a bad decision. I'm a person who made a choice. Tate looked down. And if I were a good man, I wouldn't have let you stay. Noah stepped closer. If you were a good man, you would trust that I know my own life. Tate was quiet. You need to find a nice girl, Tate said, someone who can give you what I can't. Noah's expression hardened. Stop talking like you know what I want. Someone who can give you children, happiness, social acceptance. Noah shook his head. You keep listing things that matter to everyone else. He pointed gently toward Tate. But you never mention what matters to me. Tate looked at him. You honestly think you're going to be accepted by society when they find out whose bed you sleep in? Tate laughed quietly. You won't want to stay long when people start calling you gay, a fag, or a natural person. Noah stared at him. Do you really think I've spent 20 years next to you without knowing people might judge me? Tate didn't answer. No one forced me to stay, Noah continued. No one tricked me, no one took away my choices. He stepped closer. I stayed because I wanted to. Tate looked away. Nobody in my social scene would ever believe what we have is platonic. Noah gave a small sad smile. Maybe that says more about your social scene than it says about us. Tate looked at him. They don't care about the truth. Noah nodded slowly. Maybe not. A pause. But I do. Tate went quiet. The truth doesn't matter to rich people, Tate said. It matters what story sells the most newspapers. Noah held his gaze. Then let them read whatever story they want. He reached for Tate's hand. I'm not living my life based on a newspaper headline. I need to go, Tate said. The words were quiet, but they carried the same finality he had been using all morning. Noah's face fell slightly. Tate, don't follow me. Tate turned toward the door, forcing himself to keep moving. He picked up his bags and started walking downstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Noah watched him go for a moment. Then he moved. Before Tate could reach the front door, Noah wrapped his arms around him from behind, stopping him. Tate froze. Noah. I told you, Noah said quietly. Tate looked down at Noah's arms around him. I told you wherever Tate Blue is. Noah held on tighter. That's where Noah Lunas is going to be. Tate closed his eyes. No, we don't do this. I don't care. Noah's voice was steady. I don't care if you go to some mansion, some tiny apartment, a hotel, or a gas station parking lot. Tate looked back at him. I don't care if I have to sit next to you in a car for hours or sleep in the back of your car because you're too stubborn to admit you don't actually want me to leave you. Despite himself, Tate almost smiled. Almost. Noah continued. We don't leave the other one behind. The words hit Tate harder than Noah probably realized. You don't get to amputate me from your life because you decided you're too damaged to be loved. Tate went still. Not after 20 years. Noah's voice softened. Not after all of this. You make it sound so simple. No, Noah said, it's not simple. A pause. It's just my choice. Tate swallowed. I'm trying to protect you. No, Noah replied. You're trying to protect yourself from finding out that I might actually choose you. Tate looked away. Noah rested his forehead against Tate's back. You've spent your whole life believing people only stay because they need something from you. His voice became quieter. But what happens when someone stays because they just want you? Tate didn't answer. For once, he didn't have a speech prepared. He just stood there, holding his bags, unable to walk away from the one person who refused to let him disappear. Tate scoffed quietly after Noah talked about what they were. What are we? He shook his head. Noah, there's nothing between us. The words came out quickly, almost too quickly, like he needed to say them before he lost the courage. There's nothing there never was. Noah stared at him. For a moment, he looked genuinely stunned, not because Tate was being cruel but because he could hear how hard Tate was trying to convince himself. Tate noticed the expression on his face and looked away. I used you for body warmth. Noah blinked. The hurt on his face was immediate. You really believe that? Tate forced himself to shrug. What else would it be? Noah let out a quiet, disbelieving breath. Tate. No, Tate interrupted, I'm serious. He gave a humorless laugh. You think someone like me would choose someone like you? Noah's face changed. Not anger. Something sadder. You still don't understand, do you? Tate sniffled. His voice was quieter now, the anger gone. What remained was something far more vulnerable. Noah looked at him. Tate. No. Tate shook his head, his eyes dropping. You keep hearing me say I don't want you, but that's not what I'm saying. He swallowed. I'm saying I don't know how to let someone stand this close to me without destroying them. Noah's expression softened. Tate gave a small broken laugh. Me loving you would be Chernobyl. The comparison made Noah go still. Tate looked up at him. Noah touched Tate's cheek. You think I'm standing here because I don't know who you are. Noah shook his head. I know exactly who you are. Tate looked away. Noah. No. Noah stepped closer. You keep talking about me like I'm some person who accidentally got trapped in your life, like I'm some innocent person who doesn't understand what I'm doing. His voice became firmer. I'm not a child, Tate. Tate was quiet. I know you're difficult, I know you're stubborn, I know you're dramatic, I know you can be impossible. For a moment a tiny smile crossed Noah's face. And yes, sometimes you are the most exhausting person I've ever met. Tate looked at him. But you're also the person who stayed awake when I was sick. You're the person who remembers things I forget. You're the person who checks every door before bed because you worry something will happen to me. Noah's eyes softened. You don't do those things for someone you're just using for body warmth. Tate looked down. I told you not to love me, he said quietly. Noah nodded. I know. I warned you. I know. Loving me is a losing game, Noah. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at him. Maybe. Tate looked surprised. Noah continued. Maybe loving you is difficult, maybe it's complicated, maybe there are things I don't understand and problems I can't fix. He tightened his arms around Tate. But you keep assuming the only reason someone would stay is that they don't know better. Tate's expression shifted and Noah continued. What if I know exactly what I'm choosing? The question silenced him. You don't, Tate corrected him. What if I know you're scared? What if I know you're carrying things I can't take away? Noah looked directly at him. What if I'm still choosing you anyway? Tate didn't answer. Because Noah wasn't arguing with him anymore. He was telling him something Tate had spent years refusing to believe. That being loved wasn't always something someone had to earn by being perfect. No, Tate said. The word came out immediately, almost like a reflex. Noah looked at him. You wouldn't be choosing me, Noah. Tate's face tightened as he tried to explain something that seemed impossible to put into words. If you choose Tate Blue. He paused. You won't find me there. Noah's expression changed. Because that was the part that hurt the most. Tate wasn't saying Noah didn't know him. He was saying he didn't believe anyone could ever truly reach him. I'm Tatum Joseph Cornelius Blue. He said his full name like it was a title, a sentence, a prison. Tate Blue is the person everyone else sees, that's the person everyone expects. That's the person who has obligations, responsibilities, and a life already written out for him. He shook his head. And there's no us. Noah stared at him. For a moment, he didn't respond because he could hear how much Tate was trying to separate himself into two different people. The person everyone demanded he be. And the person standing in front of him. Tate. Noah, listen to me. Tate's voice became more desperate. You keep saying you choose me, but you don't understand what you're choosing. Noah stepped closer. I'm choosing you. Tate shook his head. No, you're choosing the version of me you know. He looked down. The one who sits next to you, the one who makes jokes, the one who remembers your coffee order, the one who worries about whether you locked your door. His voice lowered. But that's not me. Noah's eyes softened. Maybe not. A pause. But it's still you. Tate looked at him. You don't get to decide that the parts of yourself you hate are the only parts that are real. Tate went quiet. Noah reached for his hand. You keep telling me there is no Tate Blue for me to choose. He squeezed his fingers. But I'm not choosing a name, I'm not choosing a family, I'm not choosing a company. He looked directly at him. I'm choosing the person standing in front of me. Tate looked away, but Noah noticed he didn't pull his hand back. And for the first time, that small hesitation felt more honest than all of Tate's arguments. It's too late, Tate said. It's 22 years too late, Noah. The words came out flat, but Noah could hear the exhaustion underneath them. I'm not free to choose you, even if I wanted to. Noah stared at him. For a moment, he looked like he was trying to understand how someone could say something that sounded so final while still standing there, still holding on, still clearly unable to leave. Tate looked away. Get over me. Noah's expression shifted. Tate. Find someone else. His voice became sharper, almost deliberately cruel. Get under someone else. I don't care. Noah flinched at that. Not because he believed it. Because he knew Tate was saying the ugliest thing he could think of, hopping it would finally make Noah angry enough to walk away. But Noah didn't move. We're done here. Tate picked up his bag again. Someone has to use good sense. He looked at Noah. And it's not going to be you. Silence filled the room. I'm already taken, Tate said. Noah looked at him confused. The words sounded strange coming from Tate, almost like he was referring to some invisible contract that existed beyond the two of them. I'm not free to choose you. Tate looked down. That's the part you don't understand. Noah shook his head. Then explain it to me. Tate swallowed. I can't just wake up one day and decide my life belongs to me. His voice was quiet. There are things already decided, expectations, responsibilities, a future that was planned before I was even old enough to understand what any of it meant. Noah watched him. Tate continued. Choose somebody else. The words hurt, but Tate forced himself to say them. Choose someone else before you get hurt. Noah's face tightened. You keep saying that like I'm not already aware of the risks. Tate shook his head. No, Noah, you don't understand. He looked at him seriously. It's always the person with less money who gets hurt more. A pause. That's how it works. Noah stared at him. The person with more power always has somewhere to land. They have resources, connections, people who will protect them. Tate looked away. But the other person. His voice lowered. They're the one who loses everything. Noah's expression softened. The longer I keep you near me, the more you're going to get hurt. Tate looked at him. That's what happens when you get too close to someone like me. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. You keep talking about me like I'm standing next to a storm and I don't know it's raining. Tate looked at him. But I know. Noah stepped closer. I know you're complicated, I know your life is complicated, I know there are things I'll never fully understand. He held Tate's gaze. But you don't get to decide that the only possible ending is me being destroyed. Tate didn't answer. You keep saying you're protecting me. Noah's voice softened. But sometimes protection is just another word for pushing someone away because you're afraid they'll see how much you actually need them. I don't want you like this, Tate said. Noah went quiet. The words hurt, but not in the way Tate intended. Because Noah could hear what was hidden beneath them. Tate wasn't saying I don't want you. He was saying I don't believe I'm allowed to want you. Tate looked away. I want to make a life with someone who's my equal. The statement came out with the weight of something he had repeated to himself 1,000 times. And you can't ever be. Noah's face fell slightly. Tate, you'll only get hurt. Tate shook his head. That's what you don't understand. You think love is enough to overcome everything, but it's not. He gestured around them. Reality matters. Noah watched him carefully. The only sentiment I have left for you is enough not to put you through that. Noah looked hurt. Sentiment. Tate flinched slightly. I mean that I care about you. His voice softened. That's why I'm trying to end this. Noah stared at him. What would be the point of keeping you close if I know eventually you're going to suffer because of me? A pause. Sometimes you have to wake up and realize that the realities of life make something a losing game. Tate looked at him. No amount of childish sentiment is going to change that. The words were harsh, but Noah noticed something. Tate didn't sound like someone who had stopped caring. He sounded like someone who cared so much that he was trying to convince himself that caring was the problem. Noah shook his head. Childish sentiment. Tate looked at him. 20 years is childish to you. Noah. No, answer me. Tate went quiet. Because you keep calling this some fantasy, some immature dream I need to grow out of. Noah stepped closer. But you're the one who spent 20 years making sure I was safe. You're the one who remembers everything. You're the one who just installed a security system because you're leaving. Tate looked down. That doesn't sound like someone who feels nothing. Noah's voice softened. You're right about one thing. Tate looked up. Reality matters. A pause. But so do choices. Noah held his gaze. And you keep acting like you're the only person allowed to decide what reality looks like. I was raised from birth to take over the family business, Tate said. He shook his head slowly. That's the part you don't understand, Noah. This isn't something I just decided I wanted. It's something I was prepared for before I was old enough to choose anything else. His expression hardened, but his voice sounded tired. I won't put you through that. I know what happens to men who don't take over the family business. I'm not going to be a Casey, and I'm not going to suffer that fate because I choose a foundation that isn't secure. Noah looked at him. I won't let you stand beside me and be humiliated because of who I am. Tate looked away. Because that's what happens when you enter a world like mine and people decide you don't belong. He gave a small, bitter laugh. Being rich means sometimes you get invited to places normal people never even know exist. Private rooms, private clubs, places where everyone already knows your family name before they know your first name. He looked back at Noah. What are we supposed to have in common? The question clearly hurt him to say. We don't go to the same places, we don't know the same people, we don't have the same life. Noah's expression tightened. Tate continued. You were just inserted into a world you know nothing about. He shook his head. And the people in that world aren't going to welcome you, they aren't going to look at you and treat you like an equal. His voice lowered. They'll judge you, they'll question why you're there, they'll decide what you are before you even open your mouth. Noah stared at him. Get out now. Tate's voice cracked slightly. Leave before they eat you alive. Noah looked at him for a long moment. Then he quietly said, You really think I'm afraid of them? Tate didn't answer. You're more afraid of them hurting me than I am. Tate looked away. Noah stepped closer. You keep telling me I don't belong in your world. A pause. But maybe you're forgetting something. He looked directly at Tate. I'm not trying to belong to your world. Noah softened. I'm trying to stay with you. Tate shook his head slowly. I'm sorry it took me this long to wake up. Noah looked at him. To finally realize we live in the real world. The words sounded less like an accusation and more like a confession. I spent years pretending things could be different, pretending that if we ignored everything outside of us it wouldn't matter. Tate looked down. But it doesn't matter. No. I took 10 years of your life, Noah. Noah's expression changed immediately. Tate, don't say that. But I did. Tate's voice grew heavier. I shouldn't have let you stay, I should have known better. He swallowed. I should have let you go in high school. Noah stared at him. High school? Yes. Tate nodded. That's when I should have understood. That's when I should have realized you were building your life around someone who was never going to be free. A pause. I should have gone to Princeton. Noah looked confused. What? Not because I wanted to. Tate gave a sad smile. Because it would have been the right thing to do. He shook his head. Instead, I stayed close, I let you stay close. And now 20 years later we're standing here pretending we can fight against something that was never going to let us win. Noah's eyes softened. You really believe that? Tate looked at him. I do. He took a breath. We need to grow up. The words were quiet but firm. And once you live among your own people for a while, once you're around people who understand your world, you'll realize I was right. Noah frowned. My own people. Tate ignored the question. You'll understand eventually. Noah watched him carefully. Tate shook his head. I'm not afraid. A pause. I'm not protecting you. Noah went still. I'm telling you the truth. Tate's voice lowered. There's no hope for anything between us. He looked directly at Noah. And there never was anything between us. Silence filled the room. Noah looked at Tate for a long moment. Then he quietly said, You really had to convince yourself that 20 years was nothing. Tate didn't answer. Because if it was nothing, then leaving makes sense. Noah stepped closer. But if it was something. His voice softened. Then you have to admit you're walking away from something you actually wanted. Tate looked away. And Noah realized that was the one thing Tate couldn't say out loud. This isn't a love story, Noah, Tate said. The words were quiet, but they carried more pain than anger. There isn't a love story between us. Noah stared at him, refusing to look away. Tate shook his head. It's a tragedy. He swallowed. And it's my fault that it happened. No, Tate. But Tate continued, as if he needed to finish saying it before he lost the courage. I don't want you that way, Noah. The statement hurt both of them. I can't want you that way. He looked down. I don't have it in me. Noah's expression softened, seeing how much Tate was struggling even as he tried to push him away. I wouldn't even know where to start. Tate gave a small broken laugh. You think I know how to do any of this? You think I know how to be normal, how to have something that isn't controlled, planned, or expected? He shook his head. I don't. A pause. You need to find somebody who wants you back the way you want them. Noah's eyes filled with hurt. Someone who can give you everything you're looking for. Tate looked at him. Someone who doesn't have to fight against an entire world just to stand next to you. Noah stepped closer. Tate. No. Tate shook his head. That person will never be me. The room went silent. I'm 24 years old, Noah. His voice became smaller. I can't keep sleeping in the bed of another 24-year-old man and pretending that someday everything is going to make sense. Noah looked at him, stunned by the finality in his voice. You make it sound like I'm some mistake you have to correct. Tate's expression changed. No. Then what am I? Tate opened his mouth but nothing came out. Because the truth was harder than the lie. Noah wasn't a mistake. Noah was the one thing in Tate's life that had never felt like an obligation. You have to let me go, Tate whispered. Noah shook his head slowly. You keep asking me to let you go. He looked at Tate. But you never once asked yourself why you're so desperate to leave. Tate looked away. Because he knew the answer. And admitting it was more frightening than walking out the door. I brought you home because I was lonely. Tate said it quietly, but the cruelty of the words was intentional. Noah could hear that immediately. I needed someone to keep me warm at night. Noah's face changed. Not anger. Pain. Because Tate wasn't just denying what they had, he was trying to erase it completely. Tate looked away. You're the one who blew it up into some epic love story. He shook his head. It's not. A pause. It never will be. His voice became firmer, like he was forcing himself to believe every word. And it never was. Noah stared at him. Tate continued. We liked similar things, we got along, we had a laugh or two. He shrugged slightly. Our parents liked each other, they liked us together, we were around each other all the time. His eyes dropped. That's all it was. Noah was silent. Tate swallowed. I've never been in love with you, Noah. The words hung between them. I could never fall in love with you. Noah's expression shifted, and for a moment Tate looked like he almost regretted saying it. But he pushed forward. I told you not to do that. His voice lowered. I told you not to feel those things around me. A pause. Because it makes me uncomfortable. Noah looked at him. Uncomfortable. Tate looked away. Yes. Noah let out a quiet breath. After 20 years, that's the word you chose. Tate didn't answer. Noah stepped closer. You really want me to believe that you spent 20 years of your life with me because you needed a heater? Tate's jaw tightened. You're rewriting everything. No. Tate looked at him. Noah. I'm not rewriting anything. Noah shook his head. I'm remembering. The room went quiet. I remember you sitting outside my door when I was upset. I remember you showing up when nobody else did. I remember you worrying about me when you were the one falling apart. Tate looked down. You don't get to tell me none of it mattered just because admitting it matters scares you. Tate closed his eyes briefly. Let me go. Noah looked at him. You've said that so many times. A pause. But you never say, I don't care about you. Tate didn't respond. Because he knew the difference. And Noah knew it too. I've spent the last 6 years alone, Tate said. Noah looked at him, confused by the statement. Alone? Tate nodded. Yes. His voice was quiet, but there was bitterness underneath it. And I'm not going to have you blow up the one thing that made sense. Noah stared at him. Our platonic arrangement. The phrase sounded unnatural coming from Tate, almost like he was repeating something he had been told to say. That's what it was. He shook his head. And now it's gone because you decided to rewrite it into something it never was. Noah's expression tightened. Tate. No. Tate looked away. I'm not going to make it dirty. The words made Noah flinch. I'm not going to turn something that mattered into something ugly. He swallowed. I'm not going to make it gay. Tate's voice grew sharper, almost defensive. And I'm certainly not going to destroy my future over something that, in my world, would be seen as unacceptable. Noah stared at him. You really hear yourself right. Tate ignored him. And you're not gay. He shook his head. You're just confused. Noah went quiet. Confused about what? About how the world works. Tate looked at him. You think feelings are enough, you think if two people care about each other that changes everything. A pause. It doesn't. Noah watched him carefully. Everyone loves me, Tate continued. The statement was arrogant on the surface, but there was insecurity underneath it. Everyone wants something from me, everyone wants to be close to me in some way. He gave a small, humorless laugh. I would honestly think something was wrong with you if you weren't infatuated with me somehow. Noah shook his head. You think that's what this is? Tate looked at him. You think I'm just another person impressed by your name? Tate didn't answer. The person I'm going to be with, Tate continued, is going to be someone approved by the people who matter. Noah's face fell slightly. Approved? Yes. Tate nodded. Someone who understands the world I come from. He looked at Noah. Someone who fits. A pause. And unless you can become a woman with boobs, I don't think this is going anywhere. Noah stared at him. For a moment, Tate almost looked embarrassed by how cruel it sounded. But he forced himself to continue. And I don't want it to go anywhere. Silence filled the room. Noah looked at Tate, not at the words but at the person saying them. You keep saying you don't want this, Noah said quietly. Tate looked away. But everything you do says you're terrified of wanting it. Tate didn't respond. Because that was the one argument he couldn't dismiss. Not because it was true. But because some part of him was afraid it was. I can't take that. Tate's voice was quieter now. I can't. He shook his head. And I won't. Noah looked at him, trying to read the expression on his face. Tate wasn't angry anymore. He looked exhausted. Like he had reached the end of an argument he had been having with himself for years. It wouldn't be fair to keep you around when nothing's happening and nothing ever will. Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. Nothing. Tate looked down. I'm not going to be that kind of person. The words sounded like he was trying to convince himself he was doing the honorable thing. I'm not going to keep someone attached to me when I can't give them what they want. Noah opened his mouth but Tate shook his head. Noah, don't. A knock suddenly echoed through the house. Both of them stopped. The sound broke the tension hanging between them. Tate glanced toward the front door. That must be the ADT guy. For a moment Noah just stared at him. The timing felt almost cruel. Tate picked up his bag. I'll show myself out. Noah's face changed. Tate. But Tate kept moving. You have to accept the way the world works, Noah. He looked back at him. His expression was sad, not cold. Don't want things that can't happen. A pause. Don't want things that won't happen. Noah stood there silently. Because you'll only hurt yourself. The doorbell rang again. Tate reached for the door but Noah's voice stopped him. You really believe giving up is the same thing as accepting reality? Tate froze. Noah stepped closer. But maybe the reason this hurts so much is that you're not actually walking away from something impossible. He looked at Tate. Maybe you're walking away from something you're afraid to admit you want. Tate's hand stayed on the doorknob. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Then Tate quietly said, Goodbye, Noah. But the way he said it didn't sound like someone who was certain. It sounded like someone trying desperately to make himself believe he was. What the fuck would you know about what I want? Tate's voice cracked slightly, though his anger covered it almost immediately. He laughed once but there was nothing amused about it. What I fucking want terrifies the shit out of me. Noah went still. Because that wasn't the answer he expected. For a second, Tate looked less like someone rejecting him and more like someone admitting something he had been trying to bury. It has nothing to do with you. Tate shook his head. Do you understand that? Noah watched him carefully. This isn't about some fantasy you created in your head. This isn't about you convincing yourself that if you just hold on long enough, everything changes. His voice became sharper. Don't make schoolgirl fantasies about what we are. Noah flinched slightly at the words. What we were. Tate corrected himself. What we were never going to be. The room went quiet. Tate looked down. You keep trying to turn this into a story where I'm secretly in love with you, and I'm just afraid to admit it. He shook his head. That's not what this is. Noah opened his mouth but Tate continued. What I want has nothing to do with you. The statement hung there. Noah stared at him. Tate looked away. That's the truth. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he said softly, "You're right." Tate looked surprised. Noah continued. "I don't know everything you want." A pause. "I don't know every thought you've had or every fear you've carried." He looked at Tate. "But I know you." Tate's expression tightened. "I know when you're angry because you're hurt. Noah. I know when you're cruel because you think kindness will make you weak." Tate looked away. "And I know the difference between you not wanting something and you being terrified of wanting something." Tate's jaw clenched. Noah shook his head. "But I'm not going to force you to tell me." His voice softened. "I'm not going to pretend I know what's inside your head." A pause. "But don't use your fear as proof that I imagined everything." Tate didn't answer. The silence between them was heavy. Because for all the things Tate was denying, there was one thing he couldn't deny. Noah wasn't asking him to choose a fantasy. He was asking him to stop pretending he didn't have a choice. "I should go." Tate picked up his bag again, his movements deliberate, as if he stayed still for too long, he might lose the ability to leave. "Please." Noah stepped forward. "Wait until the ADT guy is gone." Tate paused. "I want to talk about this." For a moment Tate just looked at him. Then he shook his head. "There's nothing to talk about." "No, there is." "Noah." Tate's tone was firm. "You can talk all you want." He gestured slightly between them. "You can talk about feelings, you can talk about memories, you can talk about what you think we are or what you wish we were." Noah's expression tightened. "But 2 and 2 equals 4. The simplicity of the statement made it hurt more. "Some things are just facts." Tate looked at him. "And nothing you say is going to change that." Noah stared at him. "It's not a math problem." Tate gave a humorless smile. "That's where you're wrong." He shook his head. "This is exactly why you don't understand." He pointed toward the world outside the house. "People think life works because they feel something strongly enough. They think wanting something makes it real." His voice lowered. "It doesn't." Noah watched him. "Tate. It's not romantic." Tate looked away. "It's not some impossible love story where two people fight the world and everyone claps at the end." A pause. "It's reality." Noah took a breath. "And you've decided you're the only person allowed to define reality." Tate looked at him. "I'm the one who has to live with the consequences." Noah shook his head. "No, you're the one who's decided I'm not allowed to." That made Tate go quiet. The knock at the door came again. Neither of them moved. Tate looked toward the sound. Then back at Noah. "Say." His voice softened. "Even now there's always something else." Noah shook his head. "No." He held Tate's gaze. "Even now, you're still trying to find a reason to leave before you have to hear what I'm saying." Tate tightened his grip on his bag. But he didn't open the door. The landline phone suddenly rang, cutting through the tension between them. Both Tate and Noah looked toward the sound. Tate sighed. "I'll answer the phone." Noah glanced toward the front door as another knock echoed through the house. "You get the door." Noah hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave the conversation unfinished, but he moved toward the entrance. As Tate picked up the receiver, the voicemail system clicked on before he could answer. A familiar voice filled the room. "Hey Tate, this is Vivian." Tate froze slightly. "I know I haven't seen you in about a month, I just wanted to check in and see if you're available." Noah paused near the door, hearing the message. "I really enjoyed our night together, I miss you." Tate's expression remained blank, but his eyes shifted. "I know you said it was a one-time thing, and I'm not trying to pressure you." A small silence followed on the recording. "But if you ever get lonely and just want to hook up again, you know my number." The voicemail beeped. The line went silent. Tate stared at the phone for a moment. Then he rolled his eyes. "I guess I have several offers." His voice was dripping with sarcasm. "Lucky me." Noah looked back at him. The comment was meant to sound confident, almost dismissive, but Noah noticed the way Tate's shoulders sank slightly afterward. "You don't sound lucky," Noah said quietly. Tate looked over. "I didn't ask for commentary." "No." Noah turned fully toward him. "But you always do that." "Do what?" Make jokes when something actually bothers you. Tate gave a small scoff. Please, Vivian is not exactly a tragedy. No. Noah nodded. But that's not what I meant. Tate looked away. The voicemail notification blinked silently on the phone. Noah studied him. You keep proving your point that everyone wants something from you. Tate didn't respond. But then someone calls because they miss you and you act like it's just another transaction. Tate's jaw tightened. Because most of the time it is. Noah shook his head. Maybe. A pause. But you sound lonelier talking about someone wanting you than you do when nobody calls. Tate looked at him. For once he didn't have an immediate answer. The knock at the door came again. The real world interrupting them once more. Tate glanced toward it. ADT. Noah nodded. But neither of them moved right away. Because somehow, the voicemail had only made the silence between them heavier. It took nearly 90 minutes for the ADT technician to finish installing everything. By the time he was done, the house had been transformed into something Tate hoped would make Noah feel safer after he was gone. Cameras covered the important areas of the property. Motion sensors were installed. The doors and windows were connected to the security system, and sensory beams were placed around the areas most vulnerable to entry. The ADT employee, Bart, walked Noah through everything carefully. The sensors are pretty sensitive, Bart explained, so you'll want to be aware of movement when the system is armed. Pets, objects moving near windows, anything like that can potentially trigger an alarm. Noah nodded, listening carefully. Bart continued explaining the difference between the alerts. There's a silent alarm option which will notify the monitoring center without sounding throughout the house. Then there's the standard alarm which will produce the loud siren you're probably expecting. He showed Noah the control panel. This is how you arm the system when you leave. This is how you disarm it when you come home. Noah followed along, repeating the steps back to him. Bart smiled slightly. Good, it's pretty straightforward once you get used to it. Then he explained the part Tate had been most concerned about. If the system is triggered and you don't disarm it correctly, the monitoring center will treat it as a possible emergency. If they can't verify everything is okay, law enforcement can be dispatched. Noah looked over at Tate briefly. Tate was sitting in the corner of the room, quiet. Bart continued. Usually, a response can be sent within minutes depending on the area. We'll also set up a passcode with you. If there's a false alarm or you accidentally trigger it, you can provide the code to stop emergency dispatch. Noah nodded. The process was surprisingly detailed. There were procedures for leaving, returning home, accidental triggers, emergency situations, and making sure the system was properly maintained. Noah asked questions. Bart answered everyone. Tate barely spoke. He just sat there watching. Listening. Making sure Noah understood every detail. As Bart continued explaining the system, Tate's phone rested in his hand. The voicemail notification remained on the screen. He had listened to one message earlier. Then another. Then another. He hadn't meant to. At least that was what he told himself. But there were more. A lot more. 20 messages. At least. Different voices. Different women. Different versions of the same thing. Hey Tate, just checking in. I know you said you didn't want anything serious, but I miss you. Call me if you're lonely. Tate sat there silently scrolling through them. To anyone else, it would have looked like proof of everything he claimed. Proof that he was wanted. Proof that he had options. Proof that walking away from Noah was the logical thing to do. But Noah, glancing over occasionally, noticed something different. Tate didn't look proud. He didn't look happy. He looked tired. Like every message was another reminder that being wanted wasn't the same thing as being known. Bart finished the final instructions. Any questions before I go? Noah looked toward Tate. Tate looked up. For a moment their eyes met. Then Tate looked away. No, Tate said quietly. Everything's covered. But Noah knew Tate wasn't talking about the security system. Once Bart left with his equipment and ladder, Noah locked the front door behind him. He stood there for a moment, looking at the new security panel. Then he entered the code carefully and armed the system. A quiet beep confirmed it was active. The house suddenly felt different. Safer. But also strangely emptier. Noah turned around and looked back toward Tate. Tate was still sitting in the corner. His phone was in his hand. He had barely moved for the last several minutes. He was listening to voicemail after voicemail. There were dozens. Noah watched as Tate scrolled through them. 50 messages. Maybe more. Messages from women whose names Noah recognized, and some he didn't. Different voices. Different memories. Different reminders of the life Tate insisted he was supposed to have. A voicemail started playing. Hi, this is Denise. I know we met and hooked up on Thursday, but I just wanted to call and ask if you're available. If you're not, let me know. Also, if you have any single guy friends, I'm looking for a great time. A pause. Call me, bye. Beep. Tate immediately pressed delete. Another message started. Hi, this is Julia. Delete. Hi, Tate, this is Judy. Delete. Hi, Tate, this is Phoebe. Delete. Noah watched quietly. The speed with which Tate erased them almost made it seem like he wasn't listening at all. Like he was just clearing evidence. Another message played. Hi, Tate, this is Uncle Joey. Tate almost pressed delete immediately, then stopped. He sighed. Business. He let the message continue. It's a business arrangement. I wanted to talk over with you concerning the family business. Give me a call back at your earliest convenience. Give my love to Noah for me. Beep. Tate deleted it. Noah raised an eyebrow. You almost deleted your uncle. Tate shrugged. Occupational hazard. Another message. Hi, this is Marcy, just wanted to check up with you. Delete. Hi Tate, this is Philippa, just wanted to check in. Delete. The room grew quieter with every erased message. Noah finally spoke. How many voicemails are there? Tate looked at his phone. He scrolled. The number sat there. He stared at it for a moment. 168. Noah blinked. 168. Tate gave a small humorless laugh. Apparently I'm very popular. But Noah didn't laugh. Because he noticed something. Tate wasn't smiling. He wasn't enjoying the attention. He wasn't flattered. He was just deleting them. One after another. Like none of them meant anything. Noah walked closer. You know what's strange? Tate didn't look up. What? You have 168 people trying to get your attention. A pause. And you look lonelier than anyone I've ever met. Tate's thumb stopped moving. For a second he didn't press delete. Then the next voicemail began to play. The machine beeped. The next voicemail began. Noah heard it before he could see Tate's reaction. There was a faint sound in the background. A glass clinking. The subtle noise of someone drinking while leaving a message. Noah glanced toward Tate. Tate didn't react. He just waited. A woman's voice came through the speaker. Hey handsome, it's Aaron. Tate's thumb hovered over the phone. Give me a call if you want a good time. Beep. Delete. Noah watched him erase it without hesitation. Another stalker, Noah asked quietly. Tate shrugged. Something like that. Another voicemail started. Hi Tate, it's... Tate pressed delete before the person could even finish introducing themselves. Noah looked at him. You don't even listen. There's nothing to hear. The next message played. Hey Tate, it's one of your ex-lovers. Noah's expression changed immediately. The word caught him off guard. Lover. It was such a simple word. But hearing someone else say it about Tate made something uncomfortable twist in his chest. Tate noticed. What? Noah looked away. Nothing. Tate gave him a knowing look. You hate that word. Noah didn't answer. The voicemail continued. Just calling to find out if you changed your mind. I'm going to Aruba the day after tomorrow. If you want to go, call me back. Beep. Tate immediately pressed delete. Noah watched the message disappear. You have people inviting you on vacations. Tate shrugged. Apparently. And you're deleting them. Yes. Why? Tate looked at him like the answer was obvious. Because I don't want to go. Noah was quiet. Tate looked back down at his phone. That's the difference, Noah. What is? People think having options means you're happy. He scrolled to the next message. It doesn't. The machine beeped again. Another voice waited. Noah watched Tate's face carefully. All those messages. All those people want his time. His attention. His name. And somehow Tate looked less like someone surrounded by opportunity and more like someone trapped inside a room full of locked doors. The next voicemail began playing. Tate reached for the delete button. Noah stopped him. Wait. Tate looked up. What? Noah hesitated. I just want to know something. Tate sighed. What? Noah glanced at the phone. Do any of them actually know you? Tate went still. For once, his finger didn't move toward delete. The voicemail continued playing quietly in the background. And Tate didn't answer. Tate stared at the phone for a moment before finally pressing delete on the message. Every woman who left a voicemail, I fucked. He paused, looking almost annoyed that he even had to explain it. Nobody knows me beyond that. Noah's expression changed. Tate shrugged, trying to make it sound casual. They know a version of me, they know my name, they know my reputation, they know what people say about me. He looked down at the phone. But who the fuck actually knows me? The question hung in the room. Tate quickly looked away, as if he hadn't meant to say it out loud. I don't care, honestly. His voice became more dismissive. I don't want to know any of them, I don't remember most of them, I don't remember what they thought was important or what conversations we had. Noah watched him carefully. Because they were distractions. Tate nodded. Exactly. He tossed the phone lightly onto the table. That's all they were. A pause. Something to fill time, something to make everything quieter for a few hours. Noah didn't respond. Because, despite everything Tate had said about being wanted, none of it sounded like he was describing something that made him happy. Tate ran a hand through his hair. All this talk about girls is making me tired. He gave a small sarcastic smile. Or maybe just reminding me why I don't want to talk about it. Noah raised an eyebrow. Tate stood up. I'm going upstairs. Noah looked at him. Tate. But Tate was already moving toward the stairs. I need a minute. He stopped halfway up and glanced back. And before you make some dramatic interpretation about that. Noah almost smiled. I wasn't going to. Good. Tate nodded. Then quieter he added. Because sometimes I just need to get away from hearing myself talk. Noah watched him disappear upstairs. For the first time all morning, Tate wasn't running away from Noah. He was running away from his own words. Noah's eyes drifted away from the staircase and settled on Tate's luggage. 3 duffel bags sat neatly in the corner of the living room. They had been packed hours ago. Ready to leave. If the ADT technician hadn't arrived when he did, Tate probably would have been halfway across Los Angeles by now. The realization made Noah's stomach tighten. Those bags weren't packed out of anger. They were packed because Tate had truly intended to disappear. Noah slowly looked around the living room. His eyes settled on the 3-tiered white shelves against the wall. Photographs. Dozens of them. He walked over almost absent-mindedly. Every frame held the same 2 faces. Noah. And Tate. There were photographs from elementary school with missing front teeth and scraped knees. Pictures from birthdays, Christmas mornings, camping trips, beach vacations, movie nights, Halloween costumes, and countless ordinary afternoons that had somehow become treasured memories. One picture showed Tate asleep on the couch, while Noah had fallen asleep leaning against his shoulder. Another showed both of them laughing so hard that neither could look at the camera. There wasn't a single photograph of Tate's parents. Not one of Andrew. None of Talia. No business associates. No extended family. No newspaper clippings. No awards. No photographs from galas or charity events. Just Noah. Years ago Noah had asked about it. Tate, don't you want pictures of your family here? Tate had almost looked offended by the question. No. Why? Because I have photographs of my family at the office. He had shrugged. I have photographs of business partners at work, friends at other houses, family everywhere else. Then he had looked around the living room. But this house, his expression had softened, is the only place I get to escape expectations. He had smiled faintly. My family's legacy follows me everywhere. His fingers had rested lightly on one of the frames. I don't want it following me in here. Noah remembered smiling at the time. I don't really understand. I know. Tate had laughed. You don't have to. He had looked back at the photographs. I just want one place where nobody expects anything from me. A pause. One place where I don't have to be a blue. He had glanced toward Noah. I just get to be Tate. Back then, Noah hadn't fully understood what he meant. He had simply been happy. Happy that, out of every person Tate knew, out of all the politicians, executives, celebrities, billionaires, and influential people who filled every other part of Tate's life, this was the one place where Tate had chosen to surround himself with memories of just the two of them. Standing in the living room now, surrounded by those photographs, Noah finally understood. The house had never been Tate Blue's sanctuary. It had been Totem's. And that made the 3 packed duffel bags sitting only a few feet away feel even more heartbreaking. My hand reached toward one of the white picture frames. I wrapped my fingers around it carefully and lifted it from the shelf. It was a photograph from my 18th birthday. I smiled despite everything. I remembered that night. Talia had practically forced us to stand still long enough for a picture. Oh, for heaven's sake, she'd laughed. Stand next to Noah, I'm getting one decent picture whether you like it or not. Tate had groaned dramatically. I hate photographs. You hate standing still, Talia had corrected. No, Tate had muttered, I hate photographs. He always did. Whenever someone pointed a camera at him, he'd instinctively turn his face away, duck behind someone else, or disappear altogether. Years ago he'd explained why. The paparazzi ruined any chance I'd ever enjoy having my picture taken. He'd shrugged as though it no longer bothered him. When strangers spend your childhood shoving cameras in your face, eventually every lens feels invasive. But that night, for whatever reason, he hadn't turned away. He had walked over beside me without another complaint. He slipped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me in close with the casual familiarity we'd always shared. Neither of us smiled perfectly. Neither of us posed. We were simply us. Then the camera flashed. A single moment frozen forever. I ran my thumb across the edge of the white frame. Looking at it now, I realized something I hadn't appreciated back then. That photograph hadn't captured my 18th birthday. It had captured one of the last moments before everything between us became complicated. Before distance. Before locked bedroom doors. Before impossible conversations. Before Tate started convincing himself he had to leave. It was one of the last photographs of the close buddies we'd always been. Before the weight of adulthood, expectations, and fear settled onto both of our shoulders. I stared at the picture for another moment. The 2 boys smiling back at me had no idea how much they would someday have to fight just to keep each other in their lives. I hadn't realized it at the time. Looking back, I don't think anyone could have known. But it became the most important photograph anyone would ever take of me. My eyes stayed fixed on the picture. Tate's arm was wrapped around my shoulders. Even now, that was the first thing I noticed. Not the birthday cake. Not the decorations. Not my smile. Tate. I remembered how shocked I'd been. He had actually allowed someone to take a photograph of him. That alone felt almost impossible. Normally, the second someone pointed a camera in his direction, he'd turn his face away, duck behind someone, or simply leave the room. If a stranger tried shoving a phone or camera in his face, the reaction was even worse. More than once I'd watched Tate swat cameras away or shove them aside in frustration. A few hadn't survived the encounter. He hated having his picture taken. He always had. That night when Talia told him to stand beside me, I had instinctively taken a small step away. I didn't want him to feel trapped. I didn't want him to think I expected him to pose just because it was my birthday. It's okay, I'd started to say, you don't have to. Before I could finish, Tate reached over, grabbed the back of my shirt and pulled me against his side. His arm settled comfortably around my shoulders. I looked up at him in surprise. He didn't let go. Instead, he looked toward Talia's camera. For one brief moment. He smiled. The flash went off. The moment was over almost as quickly as it had begun. Afterward, when everyone had gone back to talking and eating cake, I found Tate by himself. "You hate photographs," I'd said. He shrugged. "So, why'd you let Talia take that one?" He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "As long as you're in the photograph." A faint smile crossed his face. "I'm not afraid." At the time, I hadn't understood what he meant. I had simply smiled back and thought it was another one of Tate's strange little comments. Standing in the living room now, holding that picture in my hands, I finally understood. It had never been the camera he was afraid of. It was being seen. And somehow, standing beside me had made him feel safe enough to let the world capture him, if only for a single heartbeat. The Polaroid had taken a few seconds to develop. I remembered standing there, gently waving it in the air the way everyone insisted you were supposed to, even though someone always said that didn't actually help. Tate had already wandered off. Knowing him, he was probably getting another cup of punch, talking to one of the school jocks, or absent-mindedly flirting with a girl without even realizing he was doing it. I stayed behind, staring at the slowly developing photograph. As the colors sharpened and the faces became clear, my eyes immediately went to Tate. Not to myself. To him. He had the most beautiful hazel eyes. It was one of the very first things I'd noticed the day we met. That, and the fact that he sprinkled cinnamon on sliced apples. I had thought it was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. He'd caught me staring and simply said, "Try it." He'd been right. It was surprisingly good. But it was his eyes that had stayed with me. They never looked the same twice. Sometimes they looked almost golden in the afternoon sun. Sometimes they were deep green after it rained. Other times, they were warm brown with tiny flecks of amber scattered through them. They were like a rare gemstone. Always familiar. Always changing. I remember staring at them in that little Polaroid. Something about them was different. At first I couldn't figure out why. Then it hit me. The expression. Every photograph I'd ever seen of Tate in magazines, newspapers, charity events, or on television looked the same. His smile was rehearsed. His posture was perfect. His eyes were empty. Polite. Distant. Like he was simply waiting for the camera to go away. But not this photograph. The eyes looking back at me weren't guarded. They weren't performing. They weren't hiding behind the carefully practiced expression the public always saw. They were warm. Soft. Comfortable. There was a quiet peace in them I'd never noticed before. It was as though, for one fleeting moment, he'd forgotten there was a camera in front of him. Forgotten the expectations attached to his last name. Forgotten the world. I realized then that Talia hadn't just captured a picture of Tate smiling. She had accidentally captured one of the only moments in his life where he looked completely safe. I didn't understand it then. I simply thought his eyes looked beautiful. Now, years later, standing alone in the living room with that same photograph in my hands, I realized I had been looking at something extraordinarily rare. Not the smile. Not the birthday. Not the side hug. I had been looking at the only version of Tate that very few people would ever get to see. The version of him that wasn't pretending to be anyone at all. The longer I stared at the Polaroid, the more one detail stood out. It unsettled me. Tate's eyes. They looked black. Not hazel. Not green. Not gold. Just impossibly dark. It frightened me. I looked from the photograph to where Tate had wandered off with a cup of punch, laughing politely at something one of the football players had said. Then I looked back down at the picture. I realized what had happened. Tate had stood still because I wanted the photograph. Because Talia had wanted one. He had tolerated something he genuinely disliked for our sake. But the camera had caught something I hadn't seen while I was standing beside him. His smile was there. His arm was still wrapped around my shoulder. To anyone else, it looked like an ordinary birthday picture. But his eyes told a different story. They looked trapped. Like he wanted to be anywhere else. Like every second the camera remained pointed at him was another second too long. Even at 18, something about it bothered me enough that I carried the photograph into the kitchen. Talia. She looked up from cutting another slice of cake. What's wrong, sweetheart? I held up the Polaroid. Why do Tate's eyes look like that? She wiped her hands on a towel before taking the picture. She studied it for a few seconds. Oh, she said with an easy smile, that's just a camera flaw. A flaw? She nodded. Sometimes Polaroids don't develop perfectly, the lighting catches funny or the film develops unevenly. She handed it back to me. Don't worry about it. I accepted the explanation. I was 18. She was the adult. It made sense. So I slipped the photograph into the frame years later and never questioned it again. Standing in the living room now, holding the same picture in my hands, I wasn't so sure it had been the camera at all. Maybe Talia had been right. Maybe it really had been a flaw in the film. Or maybe the camera had simply captured what Tate had spent his entire life trying not to let anyone see. The fear behind the smile. I looked closer at Tate's face. The expression I'd seen 1,000 times somehow looked different now. It wasn't just discomfort. It wasn't just someone forcing themselves to stand still for a camera. It looked like someone was remembering something. Something long forgotten. Or maybe something they never wanted to remember in the first place. There was something distant in his expression, almost as though his mind had drifted somewhere else while his body remained beside me. Standing there on my 18th birthday. Maybe Tate had remembered something his seizures had forced him to forget. The thought made my chest tighten. His memory had never belonged entirely to him. Entire months had disappeared from his life, while random moments remained perfectly intact. I wondered what had crossed his mind in those few seconds before the camera flashed. I would never know, or at least it would be many years before Tate told me. Tate had done a lot of things over the years that he didn't particularly enjoy. He'd sat through movies he hated because I wanted to see them. He'd gone to school dances even though he complained about every minute beforehand. He'd tolerated birthday parties, photographs, awkward family gatherings, and countless little traditions. Sometimes he did those things because I asked. Sometimes, I realized with a sad smile, he probably did them simply because making me happy mattered to him. I traced my thumb across the edge of the frame. Why did I always come back to this photograph? Out of every picture in the house. Why this one? For years I thought I knew the answer. I had convinced myself it was because it was the last photograph taken before Emily ruined everything. That had always been the story I told myself. The dividing line. Before Emily. After Emily. But standing there at 24, I finally understood how unfair that was. Emily hadn't ruined anything. Being straight hadn't ruined anything. Neither had Tate's confusion nor his obliviousness to how I felt. Those things weren't villains. They were simply reality. The truth was much simpler. And somehow much more painful. Tate just didn't return my feelings. That was it. There was no betrayal. No deception. No grand tragedy. He simply didn't love me the way I loved him. And the heartbreaking part was that he never owed me those feelings. He didn't have to return them. He never promised he would. He had warned me over and over again not to expect something he couldn't give. I had heard every word. I just hadn't wanted to believe them. I looked back down at the photograph one last time. It still meant everything to me. Not because it proved Tate secretly loved me. Not because it captured the beginning of some love story. But because it preserved something just as precious. A moment when two boys who cared deeply for one another in different ways still believed they had all the time in the world. Before life became more complicated than either of them had imagined. Before one of them fell out of love. And before the other realized he couldn't give that love back, no matter how much he wished he could spare his buddy the pain. Years ago, Tate had told me something I never forgot. I only want my heart to touch yours. At the time, I hadn't understood what he meant. Now I wasn't sure Tate had understood it either. The sad truth was that it felt like Tate had never really allowed his heart to touch mine. And maybe I had never truly allowed mine to touch his either. Not honestly. Not without expectations. I'd loved him quietly, hoping that one day he'd feel the same. He'd cared about me deeply, but he had spent years making sure the line between us never disappeared. We had spent 2 decades standing beside each other. Yet somehow, neither of us had reached the other in the way we desperately needed. I knew what it felt like to love someone who didn't love you back. It wasn't anger. It wasn't betrayal. It was grief. The kind that never quite left. The kind that settled into your bones until it became part of who you were. My father had died when I was 3. I barely remembered him. Most of what I knew came from photographs and stories other people told. My mother, she'd been alive for years after that. But emotionally, she'd been gone long before her body ever gave out. Alcohol had taken pieces of her away until there was almost nothing left to recognize. 2 years ago, she'd finally died while drunk. The funeral hadn't felt like losing a parent. It had felt like saying goodbye to someone I'd already been mourning for years. Standing in Tate's living room holding that old photograph, I realized something that made my chest ache. None of the people I'd loved most had ever loved me back in the way I needed. My father had been taken before he had the chance. My mother had disappeared into addiction. And Tate cared about me. I never doubted that. But he didn't return the feelings I carried for him. I tried very hard not to believe there was something wrong with me. I reminded myself that love wasn't earned. It couldn't be bargained for. It couldn't be forced into existence. People either felt it, or they didn't. I knew all of that. I believed all of that. Most days. But when every person you've ever reached for has slipped through your fingers for one reason or another, it leaves a mark. Not because it proves you're unworthy of love, but because, after enough losses, some quiet part of you starts wondering whether you'll ever find someone whose heart reaches back when you reach for theirs. That was the question I carried. Not whether Tate had failed me, but whether, after all these years, I still knew what it felt like to hope without expecting to be hurt. I had buried those feelings. I had fallen out of love with Tate. If it hadn't happened when I was 18, then it had certainly happened after the Tina incident at Brown University. That was the moment I finally accepted reality. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life waiting for someone who would never see me the way I had once hoped he might. And I wasn't going to resent Tate for that. He couldn't help that he only saw girls. Whether it was simple obliviousness or something more deliberate, it no longer mattered. The result was the same. He didn't return my feelings. That wasn't a crime. It was just painful. I looked down at the photograph again. Tate's arm was wrapped securely around my shoulders. The gesture had always meant so much to me. Now it meant something different. We had always been physically close. Sharing couches. Sharing blankets. Sleeping in the same room. Leaning against each other during long car rides or movie nights. In that platonic, brotherly way that had always defined us. But emotionally, we had been millions of miles apart. I had understood what I felt for Tate. He had never truly understood what I felt for him. And if I were being honest with myself, I wasn't sure I had ever truly understood what Tate felt for me either. I knew he cared. I never questioned that. He had shown it in 1,000 quiet ways over 20 years. But whatever that feeling was, it wasn't something he was willing to fight for. Not against his family. Not against the expectations that had been placed on him since birth. Not against the future he believed had already been chosen for him. He wouldn't choose me. He wouldn't defy his parents, his family's legacy, or generations of tradition to do it. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he wouldn't. In the end, the distinction hardly mattered. Whatever Tate felt, whether it was affection, loyalty, guilt, protectiveness, or something more complicated than either of us could name, it didn't change the reality standing in front of me. He was still trying to leave. He still believed walking away was the right thing to do. And whatever existed inside his heart, it wasn't enough to make him stay. I gently set the photograph back onto the shelf. For years, I had believed understanding Tate would somehow change the outcome. Now I knew better. Sometimes you can understand someone completely. You can understand why they're afraid. Why do they make the choices they do? Why do they believe they're protecting you? And still end up standing on opposite sides of the same door. Understanding doesn't always change the ending. Sometimes it only makes saying goodbye hurt a little differently. The stairs creaked. Noah looked up. Tate came downstairs carrying a small black toiletry bag in one hand and an old metal baseball bat in the other. The sight was strangely ordinary. Like someone leaving for a weekend trip instead of trying to walk out of a 20-year friendship. He reached the bottom step and set the bat against the wall for a moment. "There are a few things left upstairs," Tate said matter-of-factly, "nothing important." He adjusted the strap of one of the duffel bags. "One of my employees will stop by tomorrow and pick up whatever I left in boxes." He shrugged. "If it's in your way, you can always move it." A faint apologetic smile crossed his face. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience." The word sounded absurd. As though the inconvenience was a few cardboard boxes. Not the fact that he was trying to disappear from Noah's life. Tate picked up the baseball bat again and walked toward the front door. He moved to pass Noah without looking directly at him. Before he could, Noah reached out. His fingers closed gently around Tate's left arm. He pulled him back. Not roughly. Just enough that Tate stopped walking. The duffel bag slipped slightly down Tate's shoulder. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house was completely silent. Then, from the small radio sitting on a shelf in the corner of the living room, music drifted softly through the room. A familiar synthesizer. A familiar melody. Tate froze. Noah recognized it instantly. "It's My Life" by Talk Talk. Tate's favorite song. Noah couldn't help but smile sadly. The song carried years of memories with it. Every high school prom. Every school dance. Every formal event Tate had somehow convinced, or more accurately dragged Noah into attending. Tate always insisted on the same song. He had quietly slipped the musicians extra money more than once just to make sure It's My Life was included before the night was over. No matter what orchestra, DJ, or band had been hired. That song always played. And every single time, Tate would appear beside Noah with an expectant grin. "Come on. I don't dance. You do now." "I really don't." "You've got two choices." "What are they?" "You dance willingly." Tate would grab Noah's wrist with a mischievous smile. "Or I embarrass both of us." Somehow, Tate always got his way. Standing there now, Noah's hand still wrapped around Tate's arm, the song felt almost cruel. It wasn't just music anymore. It was 20 years of memories condensed into 4 minutes. Tate stared toward the radio. A faint, almost involuntary smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Then it disappeared just as quickly. He swallowed. "Bad timing," he muttered quietly. Neither of them moved. The music continued playing between them. Neither is willing to let go. Neither knowing how. When I pulled Tate back, his chest gently bumped against mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. My hand was still wrapped around his arm, and then slowly, almost instinctively, my fingers found his. They laced together. Intertwined. Like they had done so many times before in different ways, in different moments, without either of us thinking about it. The music continued playing softly from the corner of the room. "It's My Life." The song filled the space between us. And somehow we started to dance. Not the kind of dancing Tate used to force me into at school dances. Not the joking, awkward movements where he would laugh because I insisted I didn't know what I was doing. This was quieter. Slower. Almost like neither of us wanted to admit what it was. Every step brought back a memory. Some were happy. Some hurt. I remembered being younger. Tate is dragging me onto dance floors. Tate pretended he wasn't having fun while smiling the entire time. Tate was making everything feel less intimidating because somehow when he was beside me, the world seemed smaller. But there were sad memories too. Moments I hadn't understood at the time. Times when Tate had pulled away emotionally while still standing right beside me. Times when I had mistaken closeness for something that wasn't there. Times when we had been physically together but somehow further apart than either of us realized. I looked at him now. The person I had spent half my life knowing. The person who knew my habits, my fears, my favorite foods, and the things I never told anyone else. The person who was still trying to leave. If this was the last memory Tate and I would ever make in this house, I wanted it to matter. I didn't want our last moment to be an argument. I didn't want the final image I carried of him to be him walking away with bags over his shoulder. I wanted closure. Something real. Something that reminded us that whatever happened next, what we had shared wasn't meaningless. I slowly rested my forehead against his. Tate went still. For a moment I thought he might pull away. But he didn't. We just stood there, swaying gently to the rhythm of the song. The same song that had followed us through years of dances, celebrations, and memories. The same song Tate had always chosen. His hand remained in mine. Neither of us spoke. Because there were some things that words couldn't fix. Some things that words could only make hurt more. So we let the music say what we couldn't. Two people holding onto something that had already changed. Two people who loved each other in ways that didn't match. Two people who didn't know if this was goodbye. Or simply another moment they would carry with them forever. Neither of us noticed when the song changed. We were too lost in the moment. The room had become a place where the past and present existed together. The house, the photographs, the packed bags by the door, all of it had faded away for a few minutes. There was only the music. Only the memory of every dance Tate had dragged me into. Only the feeling of standing there with someone who had been part of my life for as long as I could remember. Then the next song began. At first neither of us paid attention. Then Tate heard the words. I felt him change before I understood why. His entire body reacted. A visible flinch. A sharp inhale. His fingers tightened around mine as if he had been startled awake. The warmth disappeared from his expression. His eyes moved toward the radio, and for a moment he looked almost afraid. Not of the song itself. Of what it represented. The lyrics were about obsession. About wanting someone so badly that affection became possession. About confusing need with love. About someone becoming unable to let go. And Tate, more than anyone I knew, understood the danger of that line. He had spent years terrified of being too much. Too intense. Too controlling. Too attached. He had spent so much time convincing himself that loving someone meant knowing when to leave them alone. That protecting someone sometimes meant removing yourself from their life. Tate. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on the radio. The song continued, but his expression grew more distant. Like he wasn't hearing a melody anymore. Like he was hearing an accusation. I slowly squeezed his hand. It's just a song. Tate swallowed. I know. But the way he said it told me he didn't believe that. Some songs weren't just songs. Some songs found the exact places people tried hardest to hide. What is it? I asked. He shook his head. Nothing. I almost laughed. Because nobody who knew Tate believed him when he said nothing. He looked down at our hands. It's strange. What is? How something can sound completely harmless to one person. He paused. And feel like a warning to another. I studied his face. For once Tate wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He just looked unsettled. The song had touched something he didn't want to examine. Maybe because Tate had spent years worrying that anyone who loved him would eventually feel trapped. Maybe because he couldn't separate love from responsibility. Maybe because, somewhere deep down, he was afraid that needing someone too much would make him become the exact kind of person he hated. The music continued. Neither of us moved. But I noticed something. Tate didn't let go of my hand. Even though the song clearly bothered him. Even though every instinct he had told him to step away. For a few seconds he stayed. And that small choice felt more honest than any speech he had given me all morning. Obsession song by Animotion. You are an obsession I cannot sleep. I am a possession unopened at your feet. There's no balance, no equality. Be still, I will not accept defeat. I will have you, yes, I will have you. I will find a way and I will have you. Like a butterfly, oh wild butterfly. I will collect you and capture you. You are an obsession, you're my obsession. Who do you want me to be to make you sleep with me? You are an obsession, you're my obsession. Who do you want me to be to make you sleep with me? I feed you, I'm thinking by day and by night. I need you by sun and candlelight. You protest, you want to leave. Be safe, there's no alternative. Yes, there he is again, I see the fugitive. But I see danger strange everywhere. A circumstance in your naked dreams. Your affection is not what it seems. You are an obsession, you're my obsession. Who do you want me to be to make you sleep with me? You are an obsession, you're my obsession. Who do you want me to be to make you sleep with me? My fantasy has turned to madness. And now my goodness has turned to badness. The need to possess you has consumed my soul. My life is trembling, I have no control. I will have you, yes, I will have you. I will find a way and I will have you. Like a butterfly, oh wild butterfly. I will collect you and capture you. You are an obsession, you're my obsession. Who do you want me to be to make you sleep with me? You are an obsession, you're my obsession. Who do you want me to be to make you sleep with me? I wondered what this song meant to Tate. There had to be a reason for the reaction. Tate didn't react to things without a reason. Not really. He could pretend not to care, he could laugh things off, he could turn almost anything into a joke or an argument. But some things slipped past his defenses. This song had. I remembered seeing him dance to it years ago. At school dances. At parties. Sometimes completely by himself. That was the strange thing about Tate. He could walk into a room full of people who wanted his attention and somehow still look like he was somewhere else entirely. He would stand on the dance floor alone, moving to the music like nobody else existed. Sometimes people would stare. Sometimes they would whisper. Tate never seemed to notice. Or maybe he noticed everything and simply pretended he didn't. I wondered what he was thinking about during those moments. What memory was attached to this song? What person? What feeling? What version of himself did he remember when he heard it? Because there was always something happening behind Tate's eyes. A place he went that nobody else could follow. I noticed something else over the years. Whenever this song played, Tate never wanted to touch me. Not casually. Not the way we normally did. Not a hand on his shoulder. Not leaning against him. Nothing. He would physically pull away. Sometimes, he wouldn't even let me finish reaching for him before he stepped back. And if I asked why, he would always say the same thing. It's private. At the time, I didn't understand. Private. That was such a strange word to use with me. After everything we had shared. After years of sleeping in the same room, sitting shoulder to shoulder, and being closer than almost anyone else in his life. But Tate had always drawn a line around certain things. Intimate, he would say. Not everything is yours to invade. Those words had hurt more than I admitted. Because I had never thought of touching Tate as an invasion. To me, it had always been comfort. Reassurance. A way of saying I'm here. But to Tate, some forms of closeness carried a meaning I didn't understand. A meaning he guarded fiercely. Standing there now, listening to the song with him, I wondered if this was one of those moments. Maybe the song reminded him of something he couldn't explain. Maybe it reminded him of a feeling he was afraid of. Maybe it reminded him that there were parts of himself even I wasn't allowed to reach. I looked at Tate. His eyes were still fixed somewhere far away. And for the first time, I wondered if the distance he created wasn't because he didn't trust me. Maybe it was because there were places inside himself that Tate didn't trust anyone, including himself, to enter. I remembered when Tate and I were 13 and 14. We would go to cocktail parties, Christmas galas, blue business events, and gatherings where everyone around us seemed to know exactly how they were supposed to behave. It didn't matter that we were young. It didn't matter that we were surrounded by adults in expensive suits and elegant dresses. It didn't matter whether there was an actual dance floor. If music started playing, Tate would find me. Sometimes it wasn't even a song meant for dancing. Sometimes it was background music meant to fill the room while people talked about business, investments, and things children weren't supposed to understand. But Tate never cared. He would grab my arm, pull me toward the center of the room, and act like we were the only two people there. Come on, Noah. I don't think we're supposed to be dancing. That's why it's more fun. And before I could argue, he would already be moving. We would dance like we were little kids who didn't understand how serious the world was supposed to be. Tate would spin me around laughing. I would laugh because his happiness was impossible not to catch. For those moments he wasn't Tatum Joseph Cornelius Blue. He wasn't the heir. He wasn't the person everyone expected to become something extraordinary. He was just Tate. A boy is enjoying himself. A boy who wasn't afraid of looking ridiculous. Looking back, I sometimes wondered if he was putting on a performance. Not a fake one. Not exactly. But a show. Like he was intentionally displaying something. Maybe he was flaunting me. Maybe he was flaunting us. The way he held on to me while we danced always seemed like more than just playfulness. His hand would stay on my arm. My shoulder. My back. Sometimes my waist. The way he touched me wasn't usually what people would describe as typical body language between two male buddies. Not the way society expected two boys to behave. But Tate had never seemed concerned with expectations when he was with me. He was like a boy without boundaries. A person whose mind seemed to exist without borders. He didn't always think about what was normal or what people would assume. He just acted. If he wanted to pull me into a dance, he did. If he wanted to make me laugh, he did. If he wanted to keep me close, he did. And maybe that was the part I missed the most. The certainty. The way Tate could make the entire world disappear without even trying. Back then, I never questioned why he held on so tightly. I never wondered why he always seemed to need to know exactly where I was. I only knew that when Tate reached for me, I was there. And when he pulled me into the center of the room, I followed. Because at 13 and 14 years old, neither of us understood that some moments only feel endless while you're living them.